So Musk is on Mars, Zuckerberg's in Meta. Yeah. They talk about
they're living in the spectacle, literally.
They are.
They are the spectacle.
They are.
All that is solid melts into air. It's a nightmare.
Very much.
They are literally the personification of an economic role in being the spectacle. It's perfect.
It is definitive. They are definitive proof, too, that Debord is right, that nobody at any strata of this society is actually living. Just like, you know what I mean?
What's Left of Philosophy. I'm Gil. Here with me today is Will.
Hey.
Lillian.
Hi.
And Owen. Coming to you from the Motel 6.
Wasn't expecting it. That was great.
Yeah. All right. On today's episode, we're discussing some chapters of Guy Debord's 1967 book, The Society of the Spectacle. Debord was a French Marxist theorist and an artist. He was a founding member of the Situationist International, a group of avant-garde artists and radical intellectuals, along with thinkers like Raoul Vaneigem. The infamous student uprising of May 68 notably drew some inspiration from Debord and Vaneigem's work, with formulations from their texts sprayed on walls as graffiti all across Paris. It's not surprising why. These people had a way with words. Here's a quote from Vaneigem's The Revolution of Everyday Life, also 1967. Quote, "People who talk about revolution and class struggle without referring explicitly to everyday life, without understanding what is subversive about love and what is positive in the refusal of constraints, such people have a corpse in their mouth." On their analysis, the development of the capitalist mode of production by the time of the mid-20th century had reached a new phase, culminating in what Debord calls the spectacle. All that was once directly lived, Debord writes, has become mere representation. The spectacle is his name for the total mediation of social life by images. In spectacular society, we're presented with an endless stream of images of others, of ourselves, of all that can be known, imagined, and desired. The result is that we are fundamentally separated from ourselves. We find ourselves trapped in a peculiar state of intoxicated passivity, and life itself becomes unlived and unlivable. The spectacle can be understood as the negation of life. First off, because life is not imaged, but must be lived. An image, by contrast, is always a dead thing. If, in a previous stage of economic domination, being was downgraded to having, Debord suggests, in the present stage, having is reduced further to appearing. One way to understand this shift is perhaps as the hegemonic victory of the realm of pure consumption, paradoxically, at a historical moment when the sphere of production becomes fully dominant. But we can also say that in the spectacle, life is subverted and replaced by mere survival. This is a thread linking Debord and Vaneigem's divergent critiques of modern society. They both consider the downgrading of life to survival as one of the characteristic features of contemporary alienation. We can say then that the spectacle is alienation raised to the status of a near absolute. This alienation is tied to the contradictory character of capitalism, whose successful production in abundance reverts to an abundance of dispossession, and whose mode of total social integration is a unity through separation. We are the lonely crowd, encountering each other only as images mediated through an endless proliferation of screens. On these screens appear everything that is good, and everything that is good appears to us. In this way, Debord can talk about the production of pseudo-needs, or the manufacturing of pseudo-desires, which amounts to a valve for releasing some of the pressure created by an endless overproduction crisis. It's not the technology that's the problem for Debord, but the mediation of life by the image become autonomous. This also allows Debord's critique, which might at first glance seem to be narrowly restricted to a condemnation of forms of mass media, to have a direct bearing on the brutal Stalinism that had claimed for itself the name of communism in the East. For there, too, on Debord's account, the issue was representation, a party claiming to represent the proletariat for itself, but whose image of the proletariat could only be a hollow bureaucratic representation. The Stalinist party, he suggests, was built for one thing only, seizing the state, which it did. But once it had done so, it could do little more than raise the spectacle of the image of the working class in opposition to the working class itself. This is a bureaucratic negation of the real movement of proletarian revolution. And, Debord astutely noted, it would only be a matter of time before this sham populism would be outdone by the capitalist states. On the other side, fascism, too, has a spectacular character. Reliant as it is on images of blood, race, the leader, pseudo-values mythically resurrected there where capitalism's internal contradictions threaten to lead the proletariat to actually challenge class domination. Against all this, Debord wants to see a revival of genuinely historical thinking, picking up where Marx left off and reviving a proletariat that seeks to live, not merely to survive, which doesn't need leaders or teachers, and that neither needs nor wants to be represented, but which seeks to negate its separation from itself and from the bloodless world of the spectacle in a concrete movement of liberation. I want to just read one last quote here before rounding it out. He writes, "No quantitative relief of its poverty, no illusory hierarchical incorporation can supply a lasting cure for its dissatisfaction. For the proletariat cannot truly recognize itself in any particular wrong it has suffered, nor therefore in the righting of any particular wrong, nor even in the righting of many such wrongs, but only in the righting of the unqualified wrong that has been perpetuated upon it, the universal wrong of its exclusion from life." So there's a whole lot more I think I could say, but I believe I've gone on long enough. Hopefully this helped set things up properly. I'm very curious to hear what you all thought of this extremely provocative text.
I'll start. So, listening to your introduction, which was really great, and I appreciate it, it seems that one of the core animating theoretical thread of what Debord is talking about here is, it seems that for him, real politics, we can put that in scare quotes, whatever real politics are, will be anti-representational. In the longer fourth chapter that you had us, well, you didn't have us, like you offered us to read, not like you're our dad or something.
No, I gave you homework. I
Okay.
told you what to do.
Fair enough. You
I
made
say
us read.
actively that I do my homework.
Gil's
This is
my
true.
dad. I just can't speak for you guys. It's been that way for a while.
Gonna have to do another Freud episode on that one.
Oh, no.
He really likes the council system. He seems to think that the council system of direct action is almost the only real politics. So to kind of like loop this into present day, I wonder if one of what Debord is saying is that when politics becomes representation, it becomes spectacular, becomes the spectacle. It becomes investing agency in images of other things that are supposed to represent you, whether it's a political representative, whether it's a figure, whether it's like a TV show. So I guess my question here is, can politics be anti-representational in Debord's sense? So what does it mean to do without representation in politics? I want to put that as a question because I think that's very hard for me to think, because I've grown up in a representative democracy. We have a House of Representatives, that our politics are supposed to influence our representatives to act on our desires. And it seems like he's talking about a different type of politics.
They're supposed to. So, okay, so this is what I started to think about. So this was my movement of thought, reading Society of the Spectacle. In the first part of it, he's talking about this thing called the spectacle. And I think that there is, at first it was kind of about commodity fetishism and like the alienation, like an alienation read on what commodity fetishism is. And I think that's how maybe you would like think this is going to be emphasize the media a lot, or art, kind of culture industry take. See our Adorno and Horkheimer ep. And then I was kind of, interested in this because I just happened to have been reading a little bit more of the value form theory stuff recently, and the kind of the resurgent Marxist interest in the value form. And I thought there was something interesting about kind of taking this like alienated quality to either abstract labor, whether it's embodied in like an image or in commodities, to talk about like the way it actually makes us see and represent ourselves. I liked that. And then, and that's kind of what I think he meant, because he uses like the phrase spectacular labor at one point. So that's kind of what made the connection to value form theory for me. And then like as the reading progressed, I started to get this sense that like, yeah, that he wants to just like, the only authentic politics is going to challenge that inversion that takes place in Marxist theory. And I think that's maybe what you mean, Will, by saying it's like anti-representational, like the inversion of the value form, the alienation, of labor. But then I was like, dude, you like all of these politics, like literally you just must be the most authentic political actor in the planet, because there's just no kind of politics that works for you except for council communism. And then I just wondered, like, what does it mean to like demand that politics has to be authentic in this way, like kind of directly pegged to particular actors, when like the point, and I think I'm just reiterating Will's question, when like the point of politics, at least in my reading anyway, is to have institutions that actually are durable, but that are amenable to change through some kind of democratic will. But like, to say that there's no representation involved, I'm just not sure there are any politics that actually satisfy that criteria, including council communism. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't really quite get what he was driving at by the end of it.
Yeah, this is a really good series of, I think, very hard questions. I mean, he's got this discussion of this sort of movement from Hegel through to Marx, and then also like through Bakunin and so forth. I think he thinks that a starting premise of like a whole bunch of this discussion coming out of the Hegelian tradition, which we've discussed in other places, is that like the state represents us, and those institutions that comprise civil society are modes of our representation, which can allow for or create the conditions for the possibility of our freedom or our actualization. And he thinks that, I guess he thinks that that's just a bad premise, right? That whole like way of framing what's going on in politics and what's going on in everyday life, which is what this is meant to be about, is confused if we like take that to be the case. At the same time, we know that I think we agree with him like in like a certain sort of spontaneous way. Like when, Will, you were saying before, like, oh yeah, we've got these like representatives. We've got a House of Representatives. Who the fuck do they represent? They don't represent me, let's be clear, right? Or like I was like imagining or remembering like, yeah, that image, that spectacular image of like Nancy Pelosi and the crew boosted up in kente cloths. Boosted up in kente cloths. And it's like, but there's meant to be an identification, or like there's meant to be, an identification with the image being represented there. I'm supposed to see myself in that, and I just don't. Like, could
Gil, I'm not surprised you don't see yourself in kente cloths. I'm not gonna lie. No,
it's none of my business. Okay,
fair enough.
But no, I mean, he does start talking in like some concrete ways about like what he likes about the worker council system. And it is things like, of course, there will be provisional leaders. These councils can federate with one another, but in ways where it's just like just another worker doing that work of like guiding things in a provisional way and always recallable, which that's relatively concrete. And it's different than saying like, the DSA is going to represent the American working class or something. I'm not totally sure if that's a satisfying response, but I think it's getting at some of the sorts of problems that he's trying to hone in on.
I think I wonder how much of it is like anti-representation as such, or the realization that representation under conditions of a spectacular society will always have this kind of false passive element, right? This representation under existing conditions is always structured in such a way as to like isolate, disempower, and render you passive. So I wonder if there is, like, even in the council system or in, I don't know, a politics which doesn't exist yet, a kind of representation which isn't as engendering of passivity, which isn't as spectacularized or isn't captured by the spectacle in the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really cool. So it would seem what you're saying, and I think maybe Debord is saying something like this: like, it's not representation as such that is the problem; it's the conditions under which representation happens. And the conditions are, and I don't want to go too quickly because he has some strange things to say about the economy. Like, he has beef with the economy as such. He has a problem with the economy being the thing that runs things. So we can get to that, but I want to make this point really quickly, that under these conditions of the capitalist mode of production in politics, representation is not instrumental. It's actually been turned into an end in itself. And so we could maybe say something like, representation is necessary for politics, but it's not sufficient. The problem is, in the society of the spectacle, representation is taken to be necessary and sufficient. And I don't want to make people upset, but I think about some things like, representation matters. And it's as if, if you get this sort of black body, in this position of power, then some sort of politics must flow from that black body, given certain identity categories. But even more, the idea that the aim of politics is to have particular people who look X, Y, and Z way, and that you're supposed to live off of that image, rather than that that person's supposed to be instrumental in some sort of effectivity. So does that kind of align with what you were saying, Owen? That it's not representation is bad in all circumstances. How representation is taken up in politics as an end in itself, as as the thing that politics is supposed to be enjoying and living off of.
I actually think that example of, like, what Cornel West calls like brown faces in high places is really illustrative of, like, I think what he's getting at here, right? Because that is representation as an end in itself, right? I think that's what he means, what Cornel West means when he says that, like, we got to go beyond brown faces and high places. It's that, like, I think that one of the ways that liberalism has managed to integrate and to, like, neutralize identity politics is by making it like 100% about spectacularizing it entirely, right? Absorbing it into the spectacle, into an economy of images, rather than any kind of, I don't know, true anti-racism, however that might look.
Yeah, substantive policy or like content at the level of like changes in the way that, like, actual lived reality is structured.
Maybe we should just back up a little bit and just say, like, what, like, the spectacle is, because I think this is in the beginning of the book, certainly, although he continues this throughout it, there must be, I don't know, 150 lines where he says the spectacle is, and it's
it's like a wild rhetorical refrain.
It is, and it's and it evolves, and the concept is, like, progressively enriched, like, as he moves along. So he says, I hope this isn't too much of a detour. I just want to see if we can get on the same page a little bit about what some of the essential features of the spectacle are. Because he says that it's not.
I think that's really important, because whether or not you're interested in the kind of problem that he is diagnosing and then saying that, like, the solution has to be real politics against the spectacle or against, the prevailing, even the prevailing either capital or the prevailing revolutionary ideology in the Soviet Union. Although I have to admit, I just, like, really don't like reading these texts. Really triggers me. Like the Cold War framing of this stuff is, like, 60 years later. It's just so clear, and it just I'm kind of like, really, neither fascism.
Is it the both sidesism or something? Like,
neither fascism nor the Soviet Union, and the real answers, the real politics, and the true revolutionary tradition that just has not come. And I thought, wow, your criticisms of Trotsky are kind of ironic, because, like, that is basically the appeal of Trotskyism, is the true revolutionary tradition.
Yeah, interesting.
Like, over and against the Soviet Union, true. Like, neither Washington nor Moscow.
Yeah.
And actually, I thought his criticisms of Trotsky were extremely weak, like totally not getting the point of what most Trotskyists think that they are doing, which aligns very well with his own like authentic revolutionary bottom-up politics way of thinking about things. Because like I at first thought this was a Trotskyist text, and then he had these like weird paragraphs where it was like even Trotsky, blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, well,
he's also French, right? So like being just opposed is kind of critical methodologically.
Opposed,
Yeah, there's nothing more important to French intellectualism than parricide.
Anyway, the Cold War frame, the totalitarianism vibe and the Cold War framing is a little bit of an aside. But I feel like if you're gonna buy the spectacle argument, which I kind of liked to begin with, like to like move progressively to like the kind of politics that are suggestive, you have to like agree that is an adequate way of like representing the state of affairs.
Yeah, so like I guess like the one place to start would just be that, you know, so he says it's not mass media, right? And I think when we hear spectacle, you know, and I've seen that cover a million times of, you know, people gathered together watching a film or something with those like 3D goggles on or something, whatever. You know, I think your mind tends to quickly go to like, associating the spectacle with mass media, but it's also not that. Because there was one aspect of like media consumption that I think is paradigmatic for what he means by the spectacle, which is that people are gathered together and they're passive while they're together in their togetherness. It's not a real togetherness. It's like atomization, being next to one another, sitting in stands or sitting in a theater or sitting in front of entertainment.
It's serialized.
Exactly. So there's a kind of like, you know, serialization that's essential to it, and that it's passive and it's contemplative, as he uses that term, right? It doesn't call upon like any activity. And you know, this is just as a kind of material fact, like true that the only way or like places where Americans gather together is like for like entertainment and shopping, right? Like totally serialized. Those are the only times you'll see crowds, right? Like, and it's being what's the expression he uses, Gil? Alone in the crowd or a lonely crowd?
A lonely crowd. Yeah, the lonely crowd.
So part of the spectacle then I think is just. So it isn't just mass media. It's because he says the spectacle is not a collection of images. This is how he puts it. It's a social relation between people that is mediated by images. Right? So it's that atomizing, serializing effect of the spectacle, or like essence of the spectacle, I guess, that I think it might be like a good starting point, and that atomization is engendered. Images are critical to that that process of atomization, the alienation not just of us from like what we do, but the alienation of us from each other, the separation of us from each other. Right?
I have another aside that's like kind of total. I
like these asides.
It's not a philosophical point, but I was shopping today. I was buying a gift, and then I found
classic consumer society spectacle.
Yeah. But I was just but like. Cringe. Mostly when I shop, I have something I want specifically. So I'm like really not the best consumer for a whole set of advertisements, but I'll be like the best consumer for a very small subset of advertisements.
Nice.
But then it occurred to me while I was buying this gift, because I actually I wandered into like my favorite, you know, like contemporary like fashion store, and I came out and I bought something, and then I saw all of these people like hanging out, and I constantly think to myself, like, how is it that other people are so hip all the time? I've wondered this since I was like 12, because like I was always like begging my mom for brand name clothes because I didn't have any, and I desperately wanted to keep up with the Joneses as like a junior high schooler and like a high school, and even into college, I really wanted but I didn't have a lot of money, so like I wanted to buy exactly the right thing. And then and it's always boggled my mind, like, how does everyone always know to buy the hip stuff? Whereas like, I can never decide what thing to buy. I just know I want to buy one thing that'll like make the look. And then I realized what they literally walking down the street, I was like, oh my God, they do this because they shop for fun. They go outside and they just like socialize while shopping, and then they accumulate the hip stuff. They don't seek one thing.
Yeah,
I've been doing it wrong. I have to have friends. I have to have friends I shop with.
Cool friends, but
Right. But that's how I should socialize if I want to like.
That's the way that like leisure was conquered, as he puts it. Like leisure was conquered by the spectacle.
But what's interesting there is that it seems like the move that he does is you think the spectacle is something that you see, but what you see is already undergirded by the way Owen said it, a social relation or social relationship or an apparatus. And so I think what he's saying is that the spectacle is how a society is arranged for people to engage with it. He has this very strange line where goes, this is not to say, however, that the spectacle itself is perceptible to the naked eye. The spectacle is by definition immune from human activity, inaccessible to any projective review or correction, is the opposite of dialogue. So I think the spectacle or the spectacular, he even plays on, he goes from spectacle, spectacular to speculation. It's what is imposed upon us as a relationship that we aren't able to really give feedback to, or any feedback we give is really just illusory. So what it means to be hip, or advertisements or political representation, he is talking about a mode of living where social relationship, or what the social relationship is simply imposed upon you, and you either have to ingratiate yourself to it or find yourself alienated from it. And so he's describing, maybe to not be too technical, he's describing very real power dynamics of how people are mobilized, in their togetherness, that finds its expression in images. But he seems to want to peel back the image and say, what type of society arranges these images?
People that shop together on Saturday.
That type of society, yeah. I thought you were going to say people that shop together, die together or something. I was like, oh no, shop together, ride together. I was like, okay. It's a weird form of solidarity.
That might look like it's fun, but it is still survival for Debord, which I think is cool. This expression he has, he uses the term like gilded survival, right? So it looks like people are out, like quote unquote, like enjoying themselves, and it seems to be something like life. I'm not at work, like living my life. I'm out with friends, like shopping. But he's like, no, this is just a kind of reconfigured survival. It isn't life. You have no agency in there. Like it's still like totally captured by passivity. You're not living. I don't want to be like the grouchy, like shopping can be fun, I guess, if your homies, you're with your homies. Like,
but here's the thing. It is survival in a certain way, and because for all the reasons you just said, but think about it. The other big mystery, aside from how people knew how to buy all the hip stuff, was how can you afford, where are you getting all this money? I've always been genuinely confused by this.
Always.
And the only answer, it's a huge mystery. When I think, I want to buy a pair of pants, I'm like, wow, that'll take a chunk, this week, maybe, I make a decision, but everyone just has all this shit. And so I've always wondered how every season you buy these things, because you have to, the new trends, you follow them, and you have to spend money every season to do the same thing. And I'm like, they can't afford it. It's not that there are a lot of more rich people than I know. Or actually you can't afford it. You're just servicing this with debt or there has to be some other explanation other than you just can buy all these things.
This, I think, is why this is tied to the development of capital to a certain point, right? He talks about it as the spectacle at some point. He says is the accumulation of capital to the point that it becomes image. And it starts to feel like I said, overproduction crisis. There needs to be done something with all of these fucking clothes that we're making every new season. Someone's got to buy them. And now we're going to have images of happiness, right? That are projected that allow you to form your desire in accordance with the needs of an overproduction crisis. It starts to feel too it starts to sound like Veblen to me a little bit in some places, where it's about conspicuous consumption. There needs not just to be the consumption of a good, but the ostentatious demonstration, the appearing to consume, where now other people are consuming the image of your consumption, which is now the form of your happiness.
And that's a pseudo-need.
It's a pseudo-need, right? It's not actually answering to the needs of life or of living, I think. And so we've got this passivity, becoming autonomous of the appearance of consumption for itself. And this is all just a means of capital accumulation, separating the workers from what they actually require, and also from the living substance of their own labor.
But it also does something else. So while Lillian was talking, What I actually started thinking about, this is going to sound like an aside, but I swear I loop it back in. Why so many horror movies take place in suburbs? Because suburbs seem like the place of social tranquility and safety. And as someone who came from a relatively lower class to an uncomfortably middle class, by that I mean you are always worried if you're going to make your next mortgage payment. So on the outside, everything seems great, but all of these people are living on a knife's edge. And so it seems like the pseudo-need is also the generation of an image that actually hides a growing precarity that is expanding under a situation or a moment in time. Because when was this written? In the 60s, I'm guessing?
Yeah, 67.
67, where it seems like the standard of living is rising. Where it seems as if the brutalities of capitalist exploitation, that's being shaved off, at least in if you want to call it the Western or the global North. But what's being masked, what you're losing in the spectacle, is that actually the conditions of life are becoming ever more fragile. So you're buying these hip clothes, but you're servicing it with debt. You're getting all the new dishwasher in your house, but you go inside the house, you look at that marriage, and they're like looking at these bills. They're pulling out another credit card. But when they go outside, like, hey, we're great. We're the Jones. But inside, like, are we? Hey, Frank, things are great. Oh, new lawnmower. Yep.
Oh,
everything's
nice
great
lawnmower.
over here. Inside, he's just like, oh my God. I don't know if I can keep going with this. And so, I wonder when he mentions speculation, he's also, I don't know if he's talking about financial speculation, but the birth of a sort of a speculative economy of, always living on the knife's edge, always, borrowing against the future. And and seeming like this is what you need to do. And so I wonder if that can also help to distinguish between what are real needs and pseudo needs for Debord. And and is he allowed to make that distinction? I wonder if the pseudo need is a need that is simply an image need, but it seems to me that maybe a real need actually gets to something organic and material that doesn't necessarily find its expression in images.
Yeah, I wanted to just piggyback on your portrait of the suburb, which is really good.
I was thinking about the suburbs throughout the whole book.
I love coming for the suburbs.
Yeah, I mean, he says at some point that the spectacle presents itself as this enormous, undifferentiated, homogeneous positivity, right? Everything good will appear. Everything that appears is good. We're all doing great. It's all good. Everything will appear, and everything that appears is going to be great. And this is the sort of the lie about it. And I think this
think
also
of the trouble you get in the suburbs if you don't take care of your lawn. They will fucking come for you.
Oh my Lord.
Seriously, it's
so
illegal
true.
not to keep the appearance of not to keep the proper
tidiness.
appearance of your yeah.
Wait, is this in Canada or is this everywhere?
I think it's in the States too.
It's definitely
I think it's a pretty general rule that there are
it
municipal.
might be that the Canadian suburbs.
I mean, Canadian suburbs are they're their own special beast.
They seem nice
truly
up there,
diverse.
but don't move to the suburb.
Don't you dare.
This fake niceness, this facade is part of the spectacular capture of life, right? And this is again, it's negation.
Can I just say, I think this is a cool. He uses the term legitimation. He talks about the spectacle as a kind of legitimation. I think it's a really interesting, innovative contribution to the concept of legitimation and how capitalism gets legitimated. Because it's one of the things I think he's trying to say is that legitimation isn't just by an idea. It's not a set of arguments and even the human rights or laws. It isn't concepts that does the real heavy lifting of legitimating this system. It's the actual stuff that we do and the way things appear is where the legitimation happens. It happens practically. It's a set of images that infuse and guide our practical life, if that makes sense, right? So, because I'm trying to think, what is he trying to get us with the concept of the spectacle that you don't get with just ideology, or that you don't get with false consciousness, and I think it's that
value.
And I think it's that those things also try to make those are also ways of making sense of legitimation and how a system that's brutal gets legitimated. But this one he's saying, look, that legitimation is done by the appearances, and not just as appearances as epiphenomena. It's done by appearances, not ideas, and those appearances are an integral part of our our practical life and how we make our practical life intelligible, how we make our desires intelligible. Like it's a much deeper conception of legitimation. Like that's where it happens. It's the lawns look nice in capitalism. Okay. All right. You don't have to tell me some argument about, like it's human nature to be competitive and this is more commensurate with human nature. So that is all, those ideas that is like, not doing any heavy lifting whatsoever.
Yeah.
What's really doing the heavy lifting?
Smiling.
Yeah, exactly. What's really doing the heavy lifting is like, have you seen like the inside of a Whole Foods or like the wine bar or whatever? Like it looks and feels a certain way. And that's where like the legitimation of capitalism happens, right? Like it's not happening with like, in the classroom or whatever.
Yeah, they're not reading Hayek or something.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's not like, Hayek's ideas are filtering through or some Locke's ideas or whatever. It's that, it's the way that you actually like experience, desire, see
perceptual
the world
reality.
around you.
Yeah.
That perceptual activity is the conversation of like the economic mode of production with itself. You know what I mean? It's the legitimation.
To this point, like he said, like maybe one way of distinguishing it from ideology, although as you all know, one of my hobby horses from forever is like saying that ideology critique is better than everyone gives it credit for.
Ideology is a concept, but I like critique of ideology.
We're all on board.
We're all
here.
on this team.
Yeah.
But like, very explicitly, he says like, when I'm talking about the spectacle, I am absolutely not talking about something super added on top of society. It's not as though like first there's the economic and then there's an image of it. Like, no, these things are thoroughly interpenetrated, right? Like at the level of the base now, if you want to use our base superstructure, like at the level of the base, everything is image already, right? And this like legitimation work, like you said, doesn't require mediation through ideas. When's the last time anyone had an idea? Like, I'm sorry. Like,
I've never had an idea.
I've never had an idea.
My students at
personally.
the beginning of this like semester, I was like, what's your exposure to philosophy? And literally none of them had a single ounce of any exposure whatsoever to philosophy. So it's not the ideas doing, that are doing the work.
Wow. We really run the world.
Oh my God. This is so, you know what? North America is so degenerate. No philosophy. Like, I had
a collapsing empire. What you expect, man?
Yeah, dude, empire in decline. The imperial core is fucked.
Okay.
We're done.
I was in my German class. I'm taking an intensive German class this month. I'm like repeating a class. Anyway, Zoom learning didn't go well for me, so I had to like backtrack a little bit. And my teacher asked like what I did. For some reason, human nature like came up in our class discussion, and like people were saying, oh, human beings are so selfish and all of this. And I said, well, some people think that, but also other views involve. And she was like, oh, are you a philosopher? And I said, well, yeah.
On site.
Oh my God.
And then suddenly, and then the other students were like, what's the answer? And I was like, okay, calm down.
Stop it.
And then she was like, oh, well, I haven't studied philosophy since high school. And I was like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Nobody, like, who, do you know what I mean? And like, she's talking about something normal. And she's like, they don't do that in the US. And I was like, and I like made a face, and then she started laughing because
one of the only remaining arguments for France is that philosophy is like one of the most heavily weighted subjects on the back when you graduate from high school. So,
like North America, we don't even teach like English or math. We're not.
Unclear how much school happens over here, but yeah. Well, I want to return to Gil's point because what you said there, it kind of like cooked my brain because, an easy way of reading Debord is he's saying we need to peel back the spectacle so we can see things as they really are. But if the image is at the base, and that's not even what he's saying. And I think that this comes back to his beef with economy, where he seems to think the economy is a place of speculation, is a spectacular sight. And so it's not about even can we see the real economy. And I'm putting all the scare quotes because even as I'm saying that, what would I mean by seeing the real economy? It's a great abstract concept. But, he's saying that to live under the dominion of something like the economy is to be beholden to a certain form of speculation, spectacularizing, where it isn't about, the real reality is being hidden by the phenomenal realm. It is that actually real reality reality is this perceptual engagement of generating pseudo-needs. And so it's not about whatever authentic politics is. It's not about getting back to real reality. It's about modifying social reality such that images aren't the only mediation we have with other people. Now, I don't know if that makes sense, but that struck me as well.
Like modifying like practical activity such that truth can become possible in a certain way.
Yeah, it's like at some point he says something like historical thought can be saved only if it becomes practical. And like I think that one way of characterizing the sort of passivity that's endemic to what he's identifying as the spectacle is that everything becomes very contemplative, right? He says this in a couple of different places. We contemplate images of things. Money is capital's contemplating itself and like contemplating its own
really funny way to put it. I love that.
Yeah. And like, again, we made a joke like this in the last episode about how, like, you know, with Hegel, he says this about Hegel. He's like, yeah, Hegel was like the world's self-understanding, which it turns out that like all things good, you know, we're great. And then with Marx, it's like, actually, just contemplating seems like not enough. We might actually have to change the world. And like, I think Debord wants us to really take that seriously.
He actually drags Marx though too, because he says later in Marx's life, once the Paris Commune failed, he says like he was cloistered. He was like doing cloistered scholarly work in the British Museum.
He's like, hold up in the British
Museum, and basically that had a debilitating effect on the theory itself. That it was no longer tied to like an ongoing practical, you know, active revolutionary activity.
I mean, that seems right, and like it's something that like I think ought to like be worried about for ourselves and anyone who does like critical theory, right? Like we talked about this a long time ago with Robin, but like, yeah, to what extent are we as like theorists of the real movement of the abolition of capitalism, like tied in with actual on the ground movement and organization? Or are we just contemplating in a new way, right? Like, are we also still just being contemplative? This
I'm
is a live
mostly contemplating currently.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of contemplating.
I'm mostly contemplating. Yeah.
In the past, pre-pandemic, Lillian was in many more meetings. I don't currently go to many meetings.
I don't know about y'all. I'm intervening directly in the hit world process. Like I'm right there. I'm an agent of spirit. But
you're part of Canada's underground council movement. You know, it's not a lot of people are talking about it, but there's actually like,
but we out here. Here. I want to push this point because I want us to like now do a type of pile on Debord. I actually like really appreciate just trying to understand what he's saying and seeing what's useful. But I think his issue with the economy, that even his critique of Stalinism, is the idea that it's still the economy that's the agent. Is that I think he wants to say that to no longer be contemplative, to actually act, the economy isn't the site of action. That politics must have some sort of autonomy where it's not having its ends decided by whatever this thing called the economy is. And I think for someone who's a Marxist, that might sound like a really deeply strange thing to say. Maybe he thinks economy is a synonym for capitalism, and so you shouldn't think that your liberation is going to come through simply reforming the status quo. But I think he's making a sort of deeper claim that maybe is a part of his peculiarity, where the economy is not the site of freedom for him. Politics is the attempt to constitute an alternative form of social reality that isn't subservient to the economy. And I think that's just odd. And maybe I'm putting this out there. He sticks with the language of the proletariat, but he wants to say, he doesn't say this explicitly, but he wants to say something like, politics will not just happen on the factory floor or something. That, politics will need to have some sort of separation from only a sort of economism. I'm wondering if that's what he is saying. I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but it's just like he keeps talking about economic necessity. So
it might be helpful that, like, I think the beef with the economy that he keeps coming back to is that the economy has become like he calls it a triumphant independent force. Like, it's become autonomous. It has its own, like, it doesn't answer to anything. It doesn't answer to politics. It doesn't answer to any externality.
Right, because there's no politics in it. Like that.
Yeah.
Okay. My brain is just like inversely related to these. Set
Yeah. So anyways, I just think just for clarity's sake, I think it's that we are under the dictatorship of the economy, and it's triumphed as a fully independent force that answers to no norm, answers to no group. I
mean, this is like I take this to be like a very basic Marxist insight, right? Like every Marxist worth their salt knows this is true, that what we're talking about when we're talking about capitalism is this thing becoming autonomous, capital and capital accumulation for itself, for nothing else.
Yeah, it's not for meeting needs, because it's not actually what it does is it just creates all kinds of false needs, like quasi needs, and it isn't
right.
Yeah.
All in the service of its own enlarged expansion and expanded reproduction.
That's what it is. It's development. It's its own internal imperatives of development that we are all. It's a totally independent force, and we're all subject to it, like under a dictatorship.
That's why, especially in our hyper-spectacular age, maybe, we're obsessed with looking at chyrons and images of GDP is up. This number is going up. These graphs mean bad thing if you have this type of debt. And those are real, but also it feels like, I'm just beholden to these random images representing things to me. Like, is my life going to go well, or is my country going to collapse because the dollar is going up?
Line go up. I mean, this is also why it's like always silly when people ask questions about like, why is Jeff Bezos, why is Elon Musk like trying to make more money? Why doesn't Zuckerberg have enough? And it's like, you fool, what are you talking about? There's no end to this. You don't have enough? They're in thrall too, right? Like, surely they get a better existence than we do.
If I could choose, I would choose their position, honestly.
But it is imposed necessity.
They're so whiny.
At all levels.
I said this before, but our billionaires are so whiny. They don't seem that happy to me. Like, they're such whiny little pieces of shit. Like, this is not like Rockefeller and
we miss them.
I think that I've been told off before for saying this, but I do actually think there's just a decrease in quality of ruling class. Just in every way. Like,
where's
morals,
our Carnegie libraries and shit or whatever? Like, we don't get anything from these
intellectual
people.
life. Yeah, they don't have any desires to do anything literally outside of themselves, like this insane narcissism. And it's not that those things are not present in previous generations of ruling class people. It's that the morals of the capitalist class itself and their outlook on their role has actually become so atomized to the point where you can't even imagine something like the Carnegie Library system being built. And that doesn't justify Andrew Carnegie as such. It's just clearly this man felt clearly he felt like he wanted to leave a legacy that was in the public interest, whether that was because he actually valued libraries and thought an educated workforce was better, or because he just wanted to be remembered well. Who knows? But something about he thought he should do that. And what is clear is that Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg do not think they should do any such thing. And
this is what happens when you have a ruling class that isn't shook.
To go to outer space.
This is what happens when
outer space or Meta. Meta also looks like such shit. Why are you
talk about
1996 Sims? Oh yeah.
Talk about fucking spectacle. The Meta shit.
Billions of dollars went into Meta to get shitty avatars of Zuckerberg, where I guess he lives there now, away from the rest of us. I love that for you. So Musk is on Mars, Zuckerberg's in Meta. Yeah. They talk about
they're living in the spectacle, literally.
They are.
They are the spectacle.
They are.
All that is solid melts into air. It's a nightmare.
Very much.
They are literally the personification of an economic role in being the spectacle. It's perfect.
It is definitive. They are definitive proof too that Debord is right, that nobody at any strata of this society is actually living. Just you know what I mean? There's zero
I look
vital.
at them, I see anti-life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, it's the negation of life.
What
does he call it? Like you said, gilded or augmented survival.
Augmented survival.
They're just
they have the most augmented, most gilded survival.
Yeah, and I actually think that's interesting that it's not even flourishing. They are just trying to scrape by each quarter with some type of gain. And so I guess I feel like my sort of last question about this is, so what the fuck is life for Debord?
Oh yeah.
What's really living? what is the substance of it? Because there has to be something that is counterposing to. Look, you won't get any argument from me. This is a nightmare. I don't love it. I'm not having the best time, but So what is life? Is it council communism? Are we?
I think
are
it
we
would
loving
have to
it?
be. I think it would have to be the first chapter of the book is not. It's he's talking about the spectacle, but the first chapter is called Separation Perfected, right? And I think that life for him, even if this isn't coextensive or if it's not a definition, I think life would have to do with actual connection, right? Actual connection and non-separation, right? And I think that when, the situationists were so named because they were like about constructing situations in which this sort of reified, alienated atomization could be undone in some way or overcome. I think that for Debord, like there are moments when we actually have connections with other people, and that's something like where life is possible. Maybe not always, but like, and that can't happen through this mediation of images, I think is his argument.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, like moments of love or genuine like camaraderie or belonging with people. Solidarity.
The feeling of an actual political victory that you had a hand in with others, perhaps.
Yeah, because so I would say connection it would definitely be part of it, and then like activity, like being able to be active and not to be constantly engaged in like pseudo activity or frenetic false activity, but to actually have like I don't know,
reaction or passivity.
Yes, that would have to be.
I just feel like what's really difficult about some of these distinctions, like the issue of needs and pseudo-needs and activity and pseudo-activity is like I actually think there is something to this. Like I think I implicitly do think that there is a way of making that distinction that is not just straightforwardly wrong. But I feel like the postmodern turn really was against making those kinds of distinctions, which is, in my opinion, what makes it mostly reactionary. But I think that it's worth asking like how you might defend those kinds of distinctions from like either just like hyper social constructionist views, like all needs are
our pseudo needs
are pseudo needs, and so there really is no way of prioritizing needs, and the only thing left is the determination of all of discourse and just bodies banging against each other in politics. I don't know, but there has to be, and just like saying that some needs are more important than others, like that must be authoritarian if you think some things are more important than others. There's just like a set of kind of obvious objections that I wonder, like, because he's writing this at a time where that wasn't really like coming out in full force yet, and I just don't think the same text could be written the same way today. So,
I think even 10 years later, in like the 70s, it would be hard to like make claims like this without like the skeptical eye of the post-structuralist critic, right? Being like, oh no, these like distinctions don't hold up.
Oh, like there are traces of non-life in life, and in life there's traces, in non-life there's traces of life.
Leave Derrida alone, Owen.
I didn't say, I wasn't naming names. Get out of here. I mean, I don't know.
He does say. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think that at some point he says something like, look, he even owns it. I was trying to find the quote, but I can't find it. But he says something like, look, yeah, of course, like this distinction is not completely fast. That like, how am I going to say that some of these needs are artificial and some of them like aren't? Like they all are, like obviously. But like so many of these needs that I think he wants us to, or desires that he wants us to like put in the pseudo bin, are the ones that would not exist if it weren't for that imperative of capital accumulation to continue. So like that's maybe a first pass at how we might try to articulate this distinction, right? Like those clothes you got to get every season. Like, do we need that? Would that need at the same time that like, sure, like aesthetic expression, artistic passion, self-expression, whatever, like that's all well and good. But would these desires and needs exist in the same way if it actually weren't all about feeding the engine of capital accumulation? I think that's where he'd like start to try to answer the question. But I'm also not sure that I find that I don't know how useful that heuristic ultimately ends up being.
I mean, I think that's
for precisely
useful,
this sorts of reasons. Yeah.
like, what if we have socialism and then we find out that actually people just want to shop? Like that's what like that's what people take away from like the DDR. They're like, oh my God, they don't like in my other German class, it was like they didn't have consumer goods. And then people are like, oh, there must have been a famine. And my teacher was like, no. You know, it was communism. No, everyone had food and housing. But they couldn't buy, they were really excited about Levi's, you understand. And there were all these things they couldn't buy. So there is this like popular narrative that like, that is in fact like a need that is just there. And like that socialism can't satisfy. And like, I think that deep down in like a lot of individuals, I think people share that fear that they don't get to go shopping.
Like, yeah, well, I genuinely don't, like, will people want to go to Disney World in socialism? I don't know.
Like, bruh, like, I want to say no, but there's the part of me that's like, come on, man.
I mean, I don't believe that. So I think that, you know, he's when he talks about leisure and what happens with people and what people do with their like non-work time, because obviously the work time is passive, right? You're at the whims of management and all these external whims. Like you have no even the activity you do there is a kind of passive activity because you have no ownership over it or over the product of it or the ends like for which you are doing that work. So that's out of the picture. That's a totally, you know, in terms of a candidate for like where life might be rather than like pseudo life. If we want to maybe, shift it to pseudo life instead of pseudo need. And then outside of work, it's also, he suggests like not living either because it's also a kind of passive activity. I mean, does anybody, I don't believe that anybody like goes to Disney World and like has a good time, like, and comes back afterwards and is like, I feel, like I just regenerated, ready for another 50 weeks of work. You know what I mean? After that experience of like walking around in the blazing heat in fake cities with like people that don't give a shit about you and like shit food and you have no money left.
Slurpee.
Like, and your family's been screaming the whole time and everyone's fighting and stuff. I just don't believe that anybody that any of these like places where life is supposed to happen, like, oh, what'd you do this year? Well, I went to Disney World or whatever. That's like the one thing. And I just, you know, I just don't think any life is happening. I'm not to like single out Disney World if you're a huge Disney World stan or something, but you can apply this to any other of the stupid leisure things that we do.
The kids of America are just
there is zero chance
right now
that any of our listeners are huge Disney World stans. There's no shot.
Yeah, I don't know why for a second there I got worried about offending the Disney World fan section of our like fan base
of the what's left of philosophy.
I've never actually been, so I don't know. You know, maybe there's some mysteries there.
You don't know what you're talking about.
He's backtracking now.
Maybe it turns out that if you go to Disneyland, Owen, you'll find that it is the purest form of joy imaginable. You'll be activated and free.
Man, think of
those.
I mean, this is like kind
it's
of
actually
possible.
Crazy how they build fake cities there.
My mother refused to take me to Disneyland like for some time because she felt this way. But then I think we went together one time as a family, her and me and my aunt, for my birthday.
I mean, I can give you.
My mom's from California, so we were already out there. And I, as a child, I had a great time, and I think that my mom was. I don't know if she had a great time, but I think I remember her thinking it was more fun than she thought, probably because I was having a great time. So I do feel like there is just like a kid.
Okay, but hold on. There's another example. I think you could just give another example, which he mentions at one point, which is Paris. Right? I mean, people go. There is a part of. There is a whole Disneyified.
Okay, hell yeah.
There's a whole Disneyified part of Paris, like the whole historical center, basically. And yeah, you go there in August. All the French people are gone. It's blazing hot. It's just a bunch of miserable Americans that are paying too much money for terrible things, you know, terrible service and shit food because they don't know where to eat or whatever. And they come back. I've seen this happen lots of times. They come back and they're like, "Oh God, that was terrible. Back to work for another 50 weeks." You know what I mean? And so I don't know. Yeah, I don't. There's lots of we've Disneylandified lots of places, made them fake spectacle locations rather than like living, breathing places of like connection and life. And so I think it's
just the thing that you would enjoy is the actual connection of people that you are with, but a lot of those places are not designed for that experience. I mean, when O's describing your kids are screaming, it's blazing hot, you just want to be back in the hotel
your waiter
room,
is like saying, you know, like fuck you to you and stuff. Like it's not
it's not fun. But what Lillian described, it seems like that's like at least a glimmer of what a substantive life could be. And that had less to do with like Disney World or Disneyland, but the joy that that was happening there, that her mom could participate in. But that's really, really hard in the life we've decided, or has been decided for us, to lead.
Well, I think that does it for us today. Sorry once again to all of our Disney fans. New episodes of What's Left of Philosophy come out every 2 weeks wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube for videos and live streams. Before closing out today, we'd like to take a minute to thank some of the people who are supporting the show on Patreon. We couldn't do this without you, and we're really grateful. Today's new patrons are Groucho Suave, Zach Clayman, Justin Goodman, Ian Adelson, Sami Al-Irani, Romeo, Aleri Fowler, Shishli, Hari Kunzru, Lucy M., Gabby Collins Fernandez, Jade Rivera, Axe, Laura Wagner, Morgan, Alice Bayangana, Georgiana Ulari, Allison Woodard, Tim Comfer, and Kai Farrow. Thank you all very much. If you too like what we're doing and want to support the show, please go to our website, leftofphilosophy.com, and click the support button. Patrons get access to exclusive content like locked episodes and bonus videos. You can also buy some What's Left of Philosophy merch from the store linked on our site. Follow us at Twitter @LeftOfPhil, and don't forget to leave us good comments and reviews on your podcast apps. With that, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.